Hello everyone, my name is Mayowa Adeniji. This presentation is titled Between Perceptions of Representative Democracy and the Willingness to Engage Elected Members of Parliament. Are Nigerian young citizens different? The research paper is written by myself and Mr. Temitayo Odeyemi, and we are both affiliated with the Department of Political Science, Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria. Young people constitute an humongous proportion of human population. Currently in the world, we are experiencing what is known as youth purge. There has been an explosion in the proportion of youths in the human population. Specifically in Africa, over 60% of the population are youths. At the same time, young citizen political disengagement and poor perceptions of the political system continue to dominate many democracies. This is particularly true of both established democracies and developing ones. There is a trend of young citizens' withdrawal and disengagement from politics, as well as negative perceptions of the political system where they live. Young citizens have also been identified as the most disengaged group in politics. These realities has been identified as resulting from factors such as general lack of interest and disaffection of young people towards the public sphere, increasing skepticism towards the way the system functions, the perception that political actors do not focus on their interests, lack in external political efficiency, as well as the influence of age, level of education, and social class. It has been established in the literatures that political disengagement and poor perceptions of young citizens results in low level and reluctant interactions with parliamentarians, distrust of parliamentarians, and low level of participation in politics, especially traditional politics. This is provable as according to the Inter-Parliamentary Union, parliamentarians below the age of 30 constitute just 2.2% of world parliamentarians in the year 2018. Now, why the phenomenon of young citizens voters apathy as a specific form of disengagement is noticeable in Nigeria? Little is known about what factors influence young people's perception of representative democracy on the one hand, and how such perceptions influence their willingness to engage elected national and subnational parliamentarians on the other hand. We must know that positive perceptions and proper young citizens' engagement with parliamentarians is important in democracies. If truly democracy is built on the assumption of majority rule and respect for minority rights, definitely the importance of young citizens' perception and proper engagement in the political system cannot be underestimated. It is important that young citizens are properly engaged and that they have positive perceptions of the way the system runs in order to ensure democratic stability and consolidation. In view of the existing realities, we proposed four research questions, which I will provide answers to in this presentation. The first question is, how do young citizens perceive the system of representative democracy in practice in Nigeria? The other is, what is the level of young citizens' awareness of the profiles of members of parliament representing their districts and constituency in the parliament? What is the level of young citizens' awareness of the existence of constituency offices and the willingness to utilize it as an instrument of engagement? And lastly, what is the relationship between young citizens' perceptions of representative democracy and the willingness to engage parliamentarians? In order to answer the above questions, we adopted concurrent mixed method research designs, which featured the use of questionnaires and focus group discussions. 217 questionnaires were distributed to serving corps members between the age of 16 and 30 in Nigeria. And three focus group discussions were conducted with three youth-based good governance advocacy groups at Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife. The data gathered were analyzed through chi-square and content analysis. Representative democracy theory is adopted as the theoretical basis of the research. The theory is inexplicably tied with the dual concepts of representation and democracy. It is built on the assumptions and principles of equality and liberty of citizens, the representation of citizens by those elected or selected by them, and the responsiveness and accountability of the representative to the represented. We have three models of representative democracy theory. They are delegate model, trusteeship model, and political model. Delegate model provides for a kind of relationship between the representative and the represented, in which the representative is the mouthpiece of the represented, and as such is expected to carry out the wills of the represented at all times. While for trusteeship model, the representative is accorded an extended liberty and is permitted to use his own intuition and convictions when making decisions. Political model, on the other hand, is an attempt to fuse the two earlier model, and it is a pragmatic approach to governance. It establishes that the representative decision should be based on prevailing circumstances. If it is most appropriate to consult his constituents before making decision at an instance, he should do that. And if at another instance it is best that he make use of his own intuition and conviction, then he should go ahead. In line with the four research questions which has been proposed earlier, I now present the findings in line with each of them. With regards to the first research questions, young citizens' perceptions of the state of representative democracy in practice in Nigeria, we present the perceptions of young citizens across the 6 geopolitical zones that exist in Nigeria. Nigeria is a multi-ethnic society which has more than 250 ethnic groups, each with their specificities. It has been established in the literature that there exists some level of disparities in the realities across the various zones. For example, it has been noticed that in terms of education and literacy, the southern part of the country is doing well than the northern part. Also, in terms of availability of financial resources, the southern part of the country is doing well than the northern part. And so in view of that reality, we want to see if there are differences in perceptions that young citizens hold of representative democracy across the various zones. And as we can see, for the north central part of the country, 88.6% of young citizens have negative perceptions of the state of representative democracy. In the northeast, all the respondents have negative perceptions of representative democracy. In the northwest, 85.7% of respondents have negative perception of the state of representative democracy, while 14.3% positively. In the southeast, 88.6% of young citizens perceive the state of representative democracy negatively, while just 11.1% positively. In the South-South, all of the respondents perceive the state of representative democracy negatively. And in the Southwest, 84.7% of young citizens perceive the state of representative negatively, while just 15.3% perceive it positively. And cumulatively across the whole country, 87.6% of young citizens perceive the state of representative democracy negatively, while just 12.4% positively. What we can deduce from this figure is that negative perceptions are general in the country, as there is no significant difference in the perceptions across the 6 geopolitical zones. And by negative perceptions, young citizens are of the opinion that Nigeria does not conform to the principles of representative democracy. Principles such as respect for fundamental human rights, respect for rule of law, independent judiciary, free press, and so on. With regards to the level of young citizens' awareness of the profiles of members of parliament representing their district and constituency in the parliament, in figure 2, we present young citizens' knowledge of the names of members of parliament. As we can see, 65.4% of young citizens do not know the name of any of their parliamentarians, either at the national level or subnational level. 1.4% of them know the name of House of Representative member and subnational members of parliament only. And 6% of them knows the name of all members of parliament at the representing their district and constituency at the national and subnational levels. 3.2% of young citizens knows the name of subnational members of parliament only. 8.3% knows the name of House of Representative members only. And lastly, 15.7% of them knows the name of senators representing their district only. What we can derive from this table is the fact that there is an overwhelming young citizen ignorance of the profiles of members of parliament. As we can see in the figure, just 65.4% of young citizens do not know the name of any of their member of parliament, either senator, House of Representative member, or House of Assembly member. Also, among members of parliament, in ascending order, young citizens knows the name of senators the most, followed by House of Representative members, and lastly, subnational parliament members. With regards to the third research question, the level of young citizens' awareness of the existence of constituency offices and the willingness to utilize it as an instrument of engagement. Figure 3 shows the responses of young citizens on which of their members of parliament have and operate constituency offices. As we can see, for national parliamentarians, that is senators and House of Representative members, 24.9% of young citizens are of the opinion, believe that members of parliament have and operate constituency offices. 6.5% of them disagree, and 68.7% of them do not know whether national parliamentarians operate or do not operate constituency offices. And for subnational members of parliament at the state levels, 24.4% of young citizens believe that they have and operate constituency offices. 6.5% of them believe they do not operate constituency offices, while 69.1% of them do not know the reality of the matter, whether members of parliament at the subnational levels operate or do not operate constituency offices. What we have seen from here is that there is an high level of ignorance with regards to the existence or otherwise of constituency offices. Similarly, young citizens were asked if they have ever visited members of parliament constituency offices before. As we can see in figure 4, just 7.8% of young citizens have ever done that, and 92.2% of young citizens have never visited members of parliament constituency offices before. This is not so surprising given the fact that, as we can see in figure 3, most of young citizens do not even know if members of parliament operate or do not operate constituency offices at all. Finally, we present the result of the relationship between young citizens' perceptions of representative democracy and the willingness to engage parliamentarians. As we can see in figure 5, for young citizens who have positive perceptions of the political system, young citizens who believe Nigeria is faring well in terms of representative democracy, just 11.1% of them have ever visited constituency offices before, while 88.9% of them have never done that. And for young citizens who have negative perceptions of the state of representative democracy and operation in Nigeria, just 7.8% of them have ever visited constituency offices, and 92.2% of them have never done that. Furthermore, the p-value of the chi-square test conducted to examine the relationship between the two variables is 0.498. As it is greater than the alpha value, which is 0.05, the null hypothesis is accepted. As a result, we conclude that there is no significant relationship between young citizens' perceptions of representative democracy and their willingness to engage members of parliament. Conclusively, the data we have gathered indicates strongly that the state of representative democracy is grossly negatively perceived in the Nigerian political system. There exists no significant difference in the poor perceptions across the 6 geopolitical zones in the country. Young Nigerians believe that Nigeria is not doing well in terms of its conformity to the principles of representative democracy. Furthermore, the study reveals an absence of political education for an humongous proportion of young citizens, as they do not know the names of parliamentarians representing their districts and constituencies, both at national and subnational levels. In the same manner, young citizens' perceptions of the state of representative democracy does not significantly explain the willingness to engage members of parliament. In other words, young citizens' decision or willingness to engage members of parliament is independent of how they perceive the political system, whether negatively or positively. Thank you for watching.